Geoffrey Beene is his own man. His individual approach to fashion has set him apart. His ability to innovate with fabric and silhouettes is showcased in a celebration of his work titled Through the Decades. Beene chose one of his favourite cities, Vienna, as the setting for the show. It allowed him and the audience a flashback in time.
There were 10 pieces from every decade, and one just sort of flowed into the other. So people had to sort of decide which decade was which and which they could identify with. It was sort of fun seeing them all one after the other, and you really couldn't see any demarcation, which makes me sort of proud, is that they didn't seem to belong to any particular decade. And I do know the things that dates clothes the most are hairdos, makeup, and shoes. So most of the girls wore their hair the same, and these shoes were classic shoes without being the horrors of the 60s, the horrors of the 90s. So it came off all as very modern clothes.
Beene says that more than 100 dresses were shown in 35 minutes. It was an experience which gave him a chance to reflect on his work.
I think all the way through it, the thing that fascinated me the most was my fascination with sportswear and comfort. I think that's what made the clothes look even today, because they move so beautifully and easily. And all the way from the jumpsuits, which my first were done in the 60s, until the last jumpsuits I've done in the 90s. It was thrilling. It really was. They're modern clothes, and they call them timeless in the press, and one cannot design timeless clothes because that's defined by time itself, so it was thrilling.
Beene has fascinated audience with his tenacious ability as a designer. At times he's whimsical, on other occasions he's shocking. And yet he can also remain true to his tried and tested techniques. Beene also experiments with colour, an aspect which was not easy for him to weave into the Vienna show.
They would go from the 60s, the colors that I used in that period, which was a lot of black and white, very graphic forms, sometimes shot with the hallucinating colors of that period, shocking pink and chartreuse green. In the 70s were softer clothes and a little more muted. The 80s came on sort of gangbusters and more decorative. The 90s were when I was deeply into, and still am, minimalism and functionality.
That's Geoffrey Beene with his Through the Decades collection. That's style for this week. Next week I'll be back with more exciting spring-summer fashions. From Milan, Gabrielle Straley designs an understated Strenesse collection, but one that's highlighted by casual luxury. From Paris, high-tech fabrics and innovative shapes that define the Marithe and Francois Girbaud collection.